Nigeria, welcome to News Express. In Nigeria's increasingly volatile political landscape, some of the most consequential forces are not on the campaign trail, yet they are in courtrooms, detention facilities, and the unresolved political fractures they represent. Few figures embodied this reality more than Nnamdi Kanu, the detained leader of the indigenous people of Biafra, IPOB, whose legal battle has evolved far beyond a criminal trial into a persistent political undercurrent shaping voter sentiment, regional alignment, and national trust. As 2027 approaches, the Kanu Factor is becoming less about one man's case and more about how a region interprets the justice, identity, and inclusion within the Nigerian state. At the center of the matter is a prolonged legal process that has stretched across years, multiple court rulings, and intense political commentary. While the judiciary continues to handle charges against Kanu, the political reverberations extend outside the courtroom. In the southeast, his case is widely viewed not merely through a legal lens, but through a historical and emotional one, linked to long-standing grievance about marginalization, security operations in the region, and the broader question of federal response to separatist agitation. This perception is where the electoral implications begin to take shape. Voting behavior in Nigeria is rarely driven by a single issue, but identity-linked grievance often acts as powerful modifiers of turnout, alignment, and political enthusiasm. In several Southeast communities, discussions about the 2027 elections are already being filtered through questions of fairness, representation, and the perceived treatment of political actors associated with regional agitation. Whether it is explicitly stated or not, Kanu's continued detention has become part of that broader emotional and political calculus. One of the most significant effects of this dynamics is not necessarily who people will vote for, but who may choose not to vote at all. Voter turnout in the Southeast has been a recurring concern in recent election cycles, and analysts often point to a combination of insecurity, distrust in electoral outcomes, and political disengagement. The Kanu case fits into that ecosystem of disengagement, reinforcing narratives that the political system does not adequately reflect or respond to regional grievance. If that sentiment persists into 2027, it could have measurable implications for turnout patterns, particularly in competitive federal elections. At the same time, the issue is not politically uniformed. The Southeast, opinions on Kanu remain deeply divided. While some see him as a symbol of resistance and identity assertion, others are weary of the political and economic costs associated with separatist agitation and prolonged instability. This internal division complicates any attempt to translate sentiment into a single electoral direction. Instead, it produces a fragmented political environment where dissatisfaction does not always equal coordinated voting behavior. National political actors are aware of this complexity, even if they address it directly. Campaign strategies in Nigeria often involved careful calibration of regional sensitivities, and the Southeast remains a critical zone not only for votes but for national legitimacy narratives. The handling of high-profile detained cases, security operations, and judicial outcomes can all influence how political parties are perceived in the region, even when those issues are formally outside party control. The legal dimension of Kanu's case also adds another layer of uncertainty. Court proceedings, adjournments, and jurisdictional arguments has kept the matter active in public discourse, ensuring that it remains periodically visible in national news cycles. Each legal development tends to revive political discussion, especially online, where interpretations often diverge sharply depending on ideological perspective. In this sense, the courtroom has become a recurring political trigger point rather than a closed judicial process. Beyond sentiment and symbolism, there is also the question of how political elites may attempt to interpret or respond to the issue ahead of 2027. Nigerian politics has a long history of integrating regional grievances into broader coalition building strategies, whether through promises of dialogue, restructuring conversations, or security policy adjustments. The Southeast question is likely to remain a bargaining space in national politics. However, the effectiveness of such strategies often depends on credibility, something that is difficult to rebuild once trust has been eroded over time. Another important layer is how security dynamics intersect with political perception. As part of the Southeast has experienced varying degrees of insecurity in recent years, and these conditions inevitably influence how citizens relate to both state authority and electoral participation. In such environments, political messaging alone is often insufficient to shift sentiment, unless it is accompanied by tangible improvements in safety and governance. As a result, the Kanu Factor cannot be separated from broader security conditions in the region. At the national level, the issue remains politically sensitive. Open discussion of the case in electoral terms is often avoided by mainstream political actors, largely because it risks deepening regional polarization. Yet, beneath the surface, it remains a known variable in strategic calculations. Political analysts frequently note that even when an issue is not publicly campaigned on, it can still shape turnout patterns, protest votes, and regional enthusiasm. What makes the 2027 election cycle different is that the political environment is already highly fragmented, with multiple opposition realignments, defections, and coalition experiments underway. In such a fluid system, regional sentiment becomes even more important because national cohesion within parties is weaker than in previous cycles. This increases the likelihood that localized grievances, such as those associated with Kanu's case, could have amplified electoral effects. However, it is also important not to overstate lingering casualties. Nigerian voters are influenced by a wide range of factors, including economic conditions, inflation, fuel prices, infrastructure, party structures, and candidate appeal. The Kanu Factor operates within that broader ecosystem rather than overriding it. For many voters, it may function more as an emotional background influence than a decisive voting criterion. Still, in tightly contested elections, even marginal shifts in turnout or regional alignment can become decisive. That is why political actors continue to monitor the Southeast closely, not only for campaign engagement, but for indicators of political mood. Whether the region feels politically included or further alienated could shape not just voting patterns, but also post-election legitimacy narratives. Ultimately, Nnamdi Kanu's legal battle has evolved into something larger than its original legal boundaries. It now sits at the intersection of law, identity politics, security, and electoral strategy. As 2027 approaches, its influence is likely to be direct or uniformed, but it will continue to shape how a critical region interprets the Nigerian political project and how that interpretation translates into participation, protest, or withdrawal at the ballot box. For more updates and in-depth analysis, stay with us on News Express. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. I am Cassie Tony, and many thanks for watching.